So welcome everybody to today's talk, trying to implement RRI public engagement activities within the NewHoRRIzon project. And just a little bit of context or a little bit of background on our presenter today, Dr. Erich Griessler. He's the head of the IHS Research Group, Technoscience and Societal Transformation at the Institute for Advanced Studies, Vienna. He studied sociology and history in Vienna and Maastricht. His research covers social studies of science and technology, sociology and ELSA of biomedicine, public engagement and research and innovation policy, political regulation of biotechnology, political science, and responsible research and innovation. Erich worked on and coordinated many projects which have dealt with conceptualizing, understanding, and monitoring RRI in different areas, such as how to involve the public in debates of ethically controversial areas. He's been involved in many FP7 and H2020 funded RRI projects, such as MORI, GRRI, or Reconfigure and SuperMORI, and he coordinated the H2020 project NewHoRRIzon and 2 TA studies on non-medical DNA analysis and genome editing. He's currently coordinating the ELSA part of the ERA for Med project POBI, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Erich on a number of occasions in recent months as part of GRRIP. And I'm sure you're going to find this presentation as fascinating and as interesting as all my previous conversations with Erich. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Erich.
Thank you very much, Indrani and the GRRIP Project and Graham, and for inviting me to give this little presentation or little talk on trying to implement RRI, public engagement activities within the NewHoRRIzon project. And I would have loved if we could keep the cameras on, because it's so nice to see you all and not only talk to the void on the internet. But it is as it is, and we'll do our best. I will give a presentation on our experience, on the experiences we had in our NewHoRRIzon project, and I will talk about the NewHoRRIzon project itself. And I will talk about the activities which were created, or some of the activities which were created within the NewHoRRIzon project. And I would like to invite you, if you're comfortable to be recorded on YouTube, to stop me whenever you want and to ask questions. But we also can have a discussion at the very end of the presentation. I will try not to be too long, but I think I will terribly fail in that, because I think there are many, many things I want to tell you from a 4.5 years project. And so when I was invited by Indrani whether I wanted to give a talk to you, I was delighted, and she asked me, say something about public engagement, and I was horrified, because what do I know about public engagement activities? I have done a few, but there are many, many people who are much more experienced in that than I am doing, because I have been doing research on public engagement activities. So one of the projects, for instance, I did for within a framework program I coordinated was called City Part, which was about the effectivity and the impact of public engagement activities on policy making. So, but then I was thinking, well, actually, the NewHoRRIzon project in itself was a public engagement and a stakeholder engagement activity, and many of the lessons we drew and many of the obstacles we experienced during the NewHoRRIzon project are very well also valid for other public engagement activities. So I thought I would like to reflect a little bit on, tell you a bit about the NewHoRRIzon project and responsible research in innovation, tell you about the lessons we learned there and what we did and our approach, and then move on to give you some examples of what the stakeholders and the participants of the public engagement activities came up with in terms of public activities which should promote responsible research and innovation. So that's the plan of my talk. And as I said, you can stop me and ask me whenever you want. I think that would make also the presentation more lively, not only talking to into the void. And I have to say, I was last week in Finland at the conference, and there were 120 people most of them not wearing any masks, but it was a wonderful experience to be together with people in a room and to talk to them and to have them physically present, not only on a flat screen. And I think this is something we all need from time to time. So the NewHoRRIzon project was funded from the European Commission within Horizon 2020, within the SWOFS program, and it ran actually from 2017 to 2021. We had about 20 participants in the project, so it was a rather huge project, and it was 6.8 million euro. And a Finnish colleague of mine just last week said, well, actually, this was not a research project, this was a research program. And actually, that's what it was. It was, we involved altogether 720 participants in our social lab. So it was really a big thing to do. So the objectives of the NewHoRRIzon project were actually, it was kind of involved in the whole idea of the SWOFS unit to implement RRI. And the aim of the NewHoRRIzon project was to of RRI in Horizon 2020 and beyond. So the idea was that one of the major promoters of RRI was within the European Commission itself, but it was in the European Commission as a very small unit within DGRTD. It was the SWOFS unit, and what they wanted to do is by having the NewHoRRIzon projects have to spill over in also other program parts or in all program parts of Horizon 20, this concept of responsible research and innovation. And for that, they wanted to have this project, and that was the call. What was the call about? And our approach was to co-create with stakeholders tailor-made actions and activities within each section of Horizon 2020. So you're very well familiar with that Horizon 2020 had these pillars: excellent science, industry, societal challenges, instruments of RRI. So there were certain pillars, and we wanted to create in each of the pillars and in each of the program lines tailor-made actions which should fit the needs and expectations of the actors in research and innovation. It also should stimulate learning across sections about how to promote acceptance of RRI in H2020. So I already talked about these pillars and these sections. We wanted also to that people, stakeholders from different sectors within the research and innovation get together and talk about how they can implement RRI. We also wanted to provide a global perspective of RRI and disseminate the information beyond the European Union. We had partners from India and from Colombia and from the West Indies to get some insights from there as well. And also we tried to disseminate our findings in these countries as well. What we also did was we developed a societal readiness level thinking tool, but this you can find on the NewHoRRIzon website. I can recommend it very much. It's basically a reflection tool for people who are in research and innovation, how they can integrate RRI in a concrete project. What we also wanted to do, and maybe that's one of the where this talk comes from, we wanted to reflect, learn, and evaluate what we were doing. We wanted also to promote the integration of RRI in national research and innovation funding programs. That's the reason why we also had 4 partners from research funding organizations in our consortium. And we wanted to disseminate best practices to promote the acceptance of RRI across Horizon 2020 and generate long-term effects. One of the hopefully one of these efforts is this talk I'm giving today. It's really a pleasure for us and for me that I'm able to tell you about this, and I hope that the GRRIP project can benefit, although I know that the GRRIP project is very well advanced, and I don't know whether they will need my advice. So anyway, these were the goals of our NewHoRRIzon, and Indrani asked me to say something a little bit about responsible research and innovation. And as you know, maybe one of the strengths and maybe also one of the major weaknesses of the concept of responsible research and innovation is that it's such a fuzzy concept. On the one hand, we have the concept of, we have and had the concept of the 5 or 6 keys. As you can see, 5 or 6, it was never clear whether governance is an own key or not. So we worked with these 5 or 6 keys of gender equality, public engagement, open access, science education, and ethics and governance. But we also worked with this academic concept of anticipation, reflexivity, responsiveness, and the last term I forgot. And coming from the GRRIP project, which we were also involved in, we realized that there is so much going on in institutions which could be coined responsible research and innovation, but doesn't use this term, like corporate social responsibility, for instance, or bioethics. We also used what people consider as responsibility in their own work environment. So, for instance, also in terms of gender, there's so much going on in terms of activities in gender equality. So we also had this. So we had this very broad concept of, on the one hand, using this academic concept of anticipation reflexivity. On the other hand, using this policy concept of this umbrella concept of the keys, but being open for everything people consider as important in their work to act responsible. You can see here, this was still in the heydays of responsible research innovation, the consortium meeting, the kickoff meeting in 2017, and you can see all the logos of all the partners involved. This picture has been taken at the Institute for Advanced Studies in the courtyard. You can see that the fountain is not running, and you can see all the partners standing there and being full of anticipation and joy, being able to start with this project. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to co-create, and I already said that with stakeholders, tailor-made actions and activities within each of the Horizon 2020 sections. And we called these tailor-made actions pilot activities or pilot actions. For that, we adapted a social lab, the social lab approach, which was actually coined and created by Hassan in 2017. And the idea was basically to bring together the stakeholders, to talk to them about how they see responsibility and responsible research and innovation in their work, to discuss with them what they think was missing, and to see how they want, in which direction they want to move, and then together with them develop ideas which kind of activities would be necessary to fulfill these wishes, to fulfill these desires. So this was basically the idea. And the idea was also to do this in a way which promotes creativity, which creates openness, which creates an atmosphere where people can act freely and also act in different ways as they are usually acting in their organizations. So the idea was also to take them out of their organization and their organizational limitations and pressures, and let them converse in a new environment about ideas how to develop responsible research and innovation. Altogether, we developed 19 social labs. You can see that, you can see my cursor, right? Yeah, so you can see this wheel. You can see this wheel also in the back. I tried, since this is on YouTube, I tried to make my Stark environment a little more NewHoRRIzon-ish by putting the poster on. So you can see that the different pillars of new are in different colors, and you can see for each of the program lines we had particular social labs. So altogether we created 19 of them. We involved altogether 750 stakeholders as participants and developed more than 72 pilot actions, of which 59 were validated in work package 8. So as I already said, the social labs were at the core of NewHoRRIzon, and you could see, you can also define the social lab as a public engagement or a stakeholder engagement activities. That means you try to identify the stakeholders, you try to motivate them to participate, you try to motivate them to have ideas, to develop ideas, you try to motivate them to work on their ideas and to implement their ideas, to reflect on their experiences, to change the pilot actions and to finalize them. So that's what we did in these social labs. In this way, social labs building on the traditional participatory and community-based action research, which means that not the researcher knows what has to be done, what the problem is, but that the participants themselves define the problem, they define the solutions, and support one another in creating these solutions. What is important for them, the social lab brings together people with common interests in solving together complex problems. In this sense, it was the problem was there is a certain dissatisfaction in the research and innovation system and in how people work in that in terms of responsibility, and how can we have more responsible research and innovation in our work, in our working environment. Social labs are interactive, which means the interaction between the participants is extremely important. They are experimental in terms of that people try things out. They are also experiential in terms of that people make certain experience with the pilot activities, which they then evaluate. And in this way, they are also systematically created space. Here you can see again the social lab process. We had the social labs ran for about 2.5 years. We extended the time because COVID hit us, and it was most of the workshops we were able to do in physical presence, but some of them at the very end we had to do in online meetings, which worked well, but I think it's better to do this kind of interactive and do this kind of experiential work more in a physical context. So you can see we had a row of workshops. In the first workshop, there was this idea of getting to know each other, creating this tension between where people felt what something is missing and what they wanted to achieve, and creating ideas about how they could implement RI in their work. In the second workshop, we looked again at these ideas of the pilot actions. In most cases, we had to energize the participants because, as you probably know very well, enthusiasm is very great when you're in a workshop, but as soon as you're on a plane or the train, other things kick in, and the energy of the participant and your own energy is diminishing. So we had to energize people in the second workshop and in the third workshop. And the third workshop was basically about re-evaluating what we have been doing. Okay. Here you can see again the social lab, this wheel of the social labs. You can see we had one on ERC, for instance, one on Marie Curie, for instance, one on here you have societal challenges, here you have industry, the various societal challenges like security, society, environment, transport, energy, food, and health. And then what we put together, instruments of RI, spreading and widening participation, science with and for society, the EIT, the GRC, instruments of RI, and Euratom. So you can see very diverse, very different. Some of them were programs, some of them were organizations, like for instance, Euratom, GRC, or EIT. Some of them are just funding lines, so very heterogeneous, very different in their approach and in their institutionalization. And just to give you an idea about the how crazy this was all, is these are just the these are just the social lab workshops we had. So you can see we had a tremendous amount of social lab workshop in order to bring together these 750 people together and to make them work on implementing RRI. Here you can see the number of the social lab participants per social lab. And here you can also see, and I think this is also something we have to discuss about public engagement, is the diminishing interest of people who are participating in these activities. You can see that all of them are, or most of them are starting with higher numbers than they are ending. You can also see that interest in some of them is higher than in others. You can see that in some cases it's more difficult to get participants than in others. So I think that's already a lesson for public engagement activities. It's hard to get participants. It's hard to continue to work with them, and it's hard to get particular participants for your engagement activities. So don't be frustrated. It's not you. It's just the circumstances, it's the situation, and we have to think about it, what we can do about it. You can also see that here that you have certain countries where we had more participants than in others. There are certain outliers, like here in Italy was very high, but this is particularly because we did also a social lab with the GRC, which is located at ISPRA, and that's Italy. So you had many participants there, but you could see also certain countries are very high and others are not so high. Something to discuss and something to look at. How can you have? And here I'm coming back that it's very easy to have certain kinds of participants, but very hard to get others. And I don't know how the GRRIP project is dealing with that. It was very easy to get people from academia. It was very hard to get people from public administration, the business sector, and it's also particularly hard for certain structural reasons to get people from CSOs because they don't have funding, they don't have the time. They feel sometimes, this was, for instance, an experience in the Euratom social lab, that they feel kind of outnumbered and too weak to express their opinion about nuclear power. So this is also something to take into account when you do public engagement activities. How can you make sure that you represent the right groups, and how can you support groups which are structurally disadvantaged in participating? Something we were very good at, I think, was that the gender balance was always there. Female participants were a little less in the first workshop, but were higher in the second and third workshop. And you also can see here again the decreasing number, so that it's hard to keep the continuity. So what are the lessons from public engagement activities within the NewHoRRIzon project? So first of all, what was very important for us was to identify the right stakeholders. So what we started the social labs with, and this was not on the slide, is what actually we did very thorough research in the uptake and in the problems of responsible research and innovation in each of the funding lines. So what we did was a kind of diagnosis exercise where we did surveys, where we did interviews with stakeholders to get the right people for this social labs. And for that, we used also bibliometrics, but we also used looking at the Cordes website and so on, identifying relevant projects, identifying stakeholders, identifying problems, and people who could speak about the problems. So I think one of the very important things when you do public engagement exercises, you have to know your field, you have to know your stakeholders. Then the second thing was motivating stakeholders to participate. The question is also, why should they be interested? And I think there's always a spectrum. Some people are very easy to motivate to participate and they come. very easily. Others, particularly CSOs, I already talked about that, but also policymakers are very hard to motivate to participate in. One of the things which were difficult for us was, for instance, there are certain program lines which are not interested at all in the concept of responsible research and innovation. So, for instance, I was involved in the social lab on the ERC, and although the ERC particularly stressed that they cover all the items of responsible research and innovation, they said they are not interested in the concept of interest of responsible research and innovation, and also did not participate in the social lab. So we had to work around that and find ways how we can involve stakeholders who are in basic research, who are involved particularly in excellent science, to get them on board. And we tried to do that by motivating national funding organizations who are in basic research and blue sky research. And we try to do that by motivating researchers who have an ERC grant or are evaluating ERC projects to participate in that. So sometimes it's hard, sometimes you have to work around, sometimes it's very easy. But you have to give a very clear message to people why it is important for them to participate in this project and in your project. And this is also something I think which also connects to another point I already mentioned, is you have to give people a clear goal why they should participate. And that's the reason why we had this broad definition of RRI, because if we said, okay, we are interested in implementing our RRI, then people would say, well, yes, okay, that's fine with you, but why should we be interested? Because we are doing this anyway, or we are using a different concept. Graham, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment and jump in because we've had a few questions in the chat, Erich, and it seems now would be a good time to just bring them up, given what you're talking about. First question is from Gordon from Plocan, and he's asking just regarding to the project and whether there was a payment for travel accommodation for the social lab participants and also as well the speakers as well as any advisors.
There was payment in terms of that we covered the cost of traveling and staying there, but we were not able to cover to give a payment for their participation, and this is a serious problem. I think if I would do it again, I think at least for the civil society organizations there should be some payment in terms of for their participation. But this brings us also to the question of, is it possible in terms of funding regulations? Because at that time, it was not possible for us to give this payment to people. So this is where the funding organizations are called in. But I think increasingly, the trend is going in the direction that you remunerate people who are participating, and I would not remunerate policymakers or researchers with a fixed salary, but people who are there because of they are citizens or because they are civil society representatives. They should be supported, maybe even for preparing for that, in order to give them an opportunity, because you have to have a level playing ground.
Thank you. Ruth Calloway from Swansea University wants to know how long were the individual labs?
In terms of the individual lab, I mean, we coined the term lab not only for the workshop, but it was for the entire duration. So it was 2.5 years where the labs were set up, and we had within these 2.5 years, there were 3 workshops, and these workshops lasted 2 days, which I think was a good length. And we tried in between the workshop to keep things alive by having by having online meetings, getting them involved, and so on and so on. So I think this is very important. But as I already said, I think the determination and also the commitment and also the felt responsibility to do something is very high when you are in the workshop. But as soon as the workshop is over, people, for understandable reasons, and nobody is different here, me including, other work takes over, other important things take over, and we really have to think about, and I think here COVID was of great help, because now we are used to these online meetings where you can keep up, you have to keep up the spirit and you have to keep up the motivation. This is, I think, one of the major jobs of a social lab manager, which we called one of the positions social lab manager, who was responsible for putting together the social lab and keeping it together and making people stay committed to their work.
Right. Gordon does have a follow-up question, and it's one that I'd certainly be interested in finding out as well, given my backgrounds in dissemination and communication. But with regards to the stakeholder lists for each social lab, are they publicly available, or is there GDPR issues around that? Gordon's particularly interested in the valuable list of policymakers and CSOs. And I know as well from myself, from my own experiences, there are publicly available lists around of contacts, but you know, sometimes the legality of taking those names and using them for that can be.
I think I have to talk to our officer in this respect. What we can do, what we certainly can do, and is what we try to do was, and the GRRIP project already knows about that, is that we have this ambassador program, which is basically a LinkedIn group where many participants are available, and you can look at it. But maybe we can talk about this after this meeting. Okay.
Yep, that's great. That's perfect. Thanks for that. So carry on there again.
Continue.
Thank you.
Okay,
yep.
so I already talked about difficulties to get certain participants. Some participants really don't want to engage. Others have difficulties to engage. Others are very busy to do something. So this is always an issue, and you have to be really committed, and you have to have the stamina. And you probably know that you have to continue, and you have to try to find people. Then we are already here in the process of the social lab itself. So what we try to do, and I mentioned it at the very beginning already, is how do you create a space where people get away from their usual way of thinking and also their usual way of behaving. And what we try to do is, can we create spaces, can we create environments where people feel comfortable, where people are relaxed and can talk about things, where we can, where there is not this kind of hierarchy as you have it, for instance, when you are at the conference and there's one speaker talking and all the others are listening, or the kind of hierarchy we are now orchestrating or performing with me mainly speaking and you mainly listening. So that gives me a certain advantage, also disadvantage, because I have to come up with things, but it's all the things you're thinking, they don't enter the space of our communication. So the idea was, can we use certain methods, how we can generate this creativity and get people from their, I don't like the word comfort zone, because they should feel comfortable, but they should come out of this comfort zone. And so what we used there was, we didn't have tables in the rooms. We were sitting around in like some people say it's like kindergarten. So we're sitting around in a circle. We tried methods like a dialogue, having not many upfront presentations. What we also did was having kind of take together a walk and discussing things during the walk. So, and a lot of group works, also trying a little bit new process in terms of generating creativity. So we try to use quite nowadays more and more becoming more common methods to promote this creativity and to spark creativity. And this is also when you do something different, then you also have on the one hand, disinterest or critique. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like that. We should do it the other way around. So you have to deal with these questions also, I think, in public engagement activities. On the one hand, you have to try to involve people, but you also have to stay to your plan, and you also have to work around and to face critique and to adapt to critique. I already said using workshop method to generate engagement, ideas, and pilot actions. Keeping up the spirit and motivating work in between the workshops. I already said something about that. That's really a big issue. Coping with critique of the workshop methodology and responsible research and innovation. So this was also, and this is probably you're facing in the GRRIP project is, I mean, coming from social sciences, I say for me the most important part is in responsible research and innovation is that people start to reflect their own practices and what they are doing. But many people don't have the time for that. They want us to say, RI is this and this and this, and tell us how we can do it and and give us a certificate afterwards. So there is a certain tension in between these practicalities and this openness of social scientists to say, well, we cannot tell you what our responsibility is. You have to know by yourself, and you have to come to terms on your own. And this is a certain tension which was always there. Then providing sufficient resources and difficulties to provide them. So it was on the one hand, it was very interesting to see. So the social lab approach is basically that people are coping with their own problems and they have to deal with their own problems, and there's nobody there who is doing it for them. And that's kind of provocative, because then people turn around the Lancet and say, well, actually, we are doing your work. You know, you're hired by the Commission to implement RRI, and we are doing all the work. So you have to also cope with this kind of criticism, and you have to give them sufficient resources. So for each social lab, we had, in these days, in 2017, there was no cascade funding there yet. Something which is now quite easy. So what we did there was we earmarked for each social lab €5,000, which is not very much, that people had, and they could do with it whatever they wanted, which is to fulfill their pilot action. So there was some money there, but it was always not enough. So this is always, you have to cope with, people need resources, and do you have enough resources for them? I already talked about this, turning participants from this consumer orientation of workshop to agents or not. So this is a difficulty. Do they really engage? Do they really want to do something? Or do they think, well, I'm at the workshop, now I'm going to be entertained, and when it's over, and I don't have anything to do. If I'm good-willed, I will fill in an evaluation sheet. But that's not the idea of a social lab, and I think that's not an idea of a public engagement activity in the strong sense. Something which is always frustrating is losing participants. So you don't hear from them. You have to, and then it was clear for us, and this was for myself a learning experience, was if somebody wants to leave, then he or she should leave. We can find new ones. I think this is also something which we learned for the pilot actions. If a certain pilot actions didn't get enough support, then let it drop. We will find something new. So this was, for instance, the case in my own ERC social lab. We had, as I mentioned, we had great difficulties in recruiting participants for that because the ERC refused cooperation. But then we had many pilot action ideas in the first workshop, but only one of them came to fruition, and we came and then there was one new participant who had this wonderful idea of the Grado log. I will talk about that later, and this was great and unexpected. So it's also be open for the unexpected. Giving in failure of pilot actions and finding new ones. I already talked about that. Modifying the method is important. Thinking about how you can better engage participants. That's something we always did. After each of the workshops, we sat together and said what worked, what didn't work, what do we have to do differently. We had this, which is also an interesting thing, is so we had these 19 social labs, which meant that we had 19 social lab teams consisting of a social lab manager who was responsible for keeping the social labs together. We had a social lab facilitator who was only responsible for managing the process of the workshop. So this was very important for us, that you split this responsibility between the person who is responsible for that the process works and the person who is responsible for the content. And so we then sat together in these teams and thus discussed what worked, what didn't work, what should we do differently. And we also thought, what can be standardized and what should be open for each of the social lab, because a social lab where you have many industry representatives works differently than a social lab where you have many representatives from Euratom or many social scientists. So there was this kind of tension between how far can you standardize it and make it easy, because if you standardize it, then the social lab manager and facilitator can say, we have to do this and this and this, but then you're not very open to what's happening. So there's this tendency, this tension between standardization on the one hand and flexibility on the other hand, which also creates within the consortium a kind of tension and a kind of frustration and also insecurity. But I think you have to cope with this insecurity as well. Yeah, that's a thing I think which is important, particularly for cascade funding. And this is something where we then thought, oh, this is something we should have thought earlier. So when we started this project, the DG, the data protection guideline was not out there yet. So it came in, it just hit us when we were 1 year in the project, but that was not the problem. But what was the problem was, since there was this kind of cascading activity, so it was for us very easy to have the informed consent for all the social labs and so on and so on. But then we kind of divulged the responsibility for the pilot actions to the pilot actions host, to the participants of the social labs, and then you have to make sure that they also keep informed consent and all so that this is kept and is legal, lawfully made. So this is something you have to look at it. And the longevity after the funding ended is a problem for all projects. It will be a problem for the GRRIP project as well. So this is something which is also for the social labs and also for the social activities. So these were kind of main, and there are many, many, many more lessons to be learned, but I think I don't want to drag on too long. And I see Graham waving his hand.
Waving frantically. Just a question from Gordon on this as well, again from ProCan. But at the proposal stage, did you have the names or the themes of the 19 social labs already determined? What was the process involved with that?
So at the very beginning, it was clear for us, and this was already in the proposal. So the proposal said, so we have to start where the participants are, and the participants are with Horizon 2020. So Horizon 2020 is where the action should happen. And Horizon 2020 has a certain structure, it has the pillars, and it has the program lines. Therefore, we want to orient towards the program lines. I think you could have cut the cake differently, but that's the way we did, because we thought you should always use the structure which your client is using, because then he or she feels comfortable, because she can locate him or herself within that. And then it was also very easy for that. And let me add something about difficulties of recruiting participants. I think one of the important things, since this would have been actually implementation in the European Commission itself, was one of the frustrations at the very beginning was that actually we would have loved to involve the European Commission much stronger than we were able to do. So we invited them, for instance, to participate in our advisory board, and we invited them to participate in the social labs. But then there also was always the response was always for the reason of neutrality and for being not accused of trying to put pressure on the research projects. They want to stay out. But actually, I think it would have been good if they would have been stronger involved, because it's their turf. Horizon 2020, it's their turf.
On the issue as well of, say, political will, the NewHoRRIzon, you looked at, you drafted a pathways declaration, I believe, which was sort of designed to encourage people to participate in the consultation project or period of Horizon Europe. I don't know if you're going to be covering that in this presentation, but
yes, I will.
Okay, perfect. Gordon has just an additional question as well around the cascade funding method. Would it be beneficial to future labs? Can you describe how you think the cascade funding method would be beneficial to future labs?
I'm not familiar with the details of the cascade funding, but in principle, I think it's a very good idea, because I mean, if you do it like this, that you say you make a call, you say, give us your ideas, and we are able to fund 20 pilot actions with a certain amount of money, which is not only 5,000 euros. I mean, I don't know whether there's this saying in English as well, but in German you say it's a drop on a hot stone. So it's 5,000 euros is not enough. But if you give them 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 for developing a good idea, I think this would be very helpful and very beneficial. And it would also help to involve civil society organizations much stronger. So I'm much in favor of that. And we would have loved to do this, but the funding opportunities then didn't allow it to do it this way. And so we worked around this a little bit, but still with 5,000 euros per, that was not enough.
Sure. Ruth from Swansea as well, just on a question on your method for recruiting participants.
So one thing we did was we had one of our consortium partners was the University of Leiden, CVTS, with wonderful Ingeborg Meyer there, and she did bibliometrics. So we looked at all the projects which are on the Cordis database, and we looked for keywords which indicate that they are interested in their work in responsible research and innovation. So then we had, and as you know, there was this flagging exercise of the European Commission, and there you could see the flagging exercise where the project officers flagged whether their projects are relevant for RRI or not. And then you could see differences between different program lines. For instance, naturally SWOS was very high, but in ERC it was 0%. So then in ERC, for instance, it helped us, the bibliometric work done in Leiden helped us to nevertheless identify projects which were in line with RRI. So we contact them, and then we invited them to participate, and some of them participated. And then to talk about the ERC social lab, which I know best because I coordinated it, we also interviewed and looked at funding organizations we looked and who are in basic research, and we asked them question, where do you see problems of responsibilities? Well, how do you see the ERC doing in that? What are things they are doing? What are things they are missing? So we tried to get, and we asked also stakeholders in terms of people who got grants from the ERC, people who applied for grants in the ERC and didn't make it, young people who tried to get funding from their academies, who are in basic research, how they look at the ERC. So we try to get as broad a picture on the ERC as possible. We also interviewed people who did research on the ERC, for instance, on gender bias in evaluation at the ERC. We looked at social science work on the performance of the ERC. We looked in material published by the ERC. We didn't get any interviews with the ERC. How do you say in English? They refused upfront to talk to us. They said they were too busy. We can find everything on the website. And finally, at the very end of on the third workshop, we had a participant from the ERC, which was very good. It was very helpful for the participant to talk to somebody at the ERC about their perspective, and that was good. So I think the recruitment itself was very important that we had this diagnosis phase before. And we also published, I think, we've published in Science an article about this, about the outcome of this diagnosis phase. Are there any other questions? Because then I would move on to the pilot actions, and I have to look at the time because I have been talking so long, already 1 hour.
I think you're good to move on there.
Okay, so when I looked at the, that's one thing, because COVID hit us, and this is more or less an invitation to you, and I hope this works. So when you click on this, you come to our website, where you have all the wonderful materials. So for instance, if you're interested in the societal readiness thinking tool, you can find it here. And we had a MOOC as well. Here you can find pilot actions. Here you can find the manual, how we organize the social labs. Here you can find the final conference, and also we also recorded everything on the final conference.
Erich, I'm not seeing any change in your screen when you're saying here is this and here is that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Your mouse is not moving.
Okay, so how am I? Can you see now the website? Okay,
yes.
So here you can see, if you're interested in societal readiness thinking tool, you can see it here. And if you here, we have a MOOC, we had the final conference, and we have publications here. And I will talk about the pilot actions, and the pilot actions are in the booklet as well described. You can find it here as well. And because we had problems with our final conference, which we had to do online, we created this virtual conference, and you can see it now loading. So what we created was a kind of virtual museum where we display the main results and the main pilot actions of NewHoRRIzon. And this is just to show you that this exists, and it's an invitation that you can walk around there and look at it. So what we did here, you see it now full screen. You see here again the symbol of the wheel. And if you click here, we created a filter. So you can see what target group are you interested? Are you interested in researchers, policymakers, funders, and so on? You click on here, policymakers, you see, okay, we have here the pilot actions which are addressed at these groups. And we also have them here. What area are you interested, i.e. democracy, education, and so on and so on. And then we have what kind of key are you interested? And this is interesting for today. Let's close this and close this. We are interested in public engagement activities. And then you can see, okay, in diversity of approaches, we had 9 pilot actions, which are with public engagement. Industrial leadership, we had 1. We had 16 in societal challenges. Excellent science, we had 3. And here you can see, we had this and this. And then you have, for instance, a short description of what is going on there. And then you say, well, that's either you say this is totally boring and I want to do something different, or you can say this is kind of interesting, but how do I get out? I hope I can get out of here. Sorry for that.
The cross mark is there, Erich.
Yeah, there's a cross mark in the top. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. So here you have some videos explaining blah, 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 but you can take this cursor and move around because this is an exhibition. And I will take you in this room. This is the Excellent Science room. And here in the Excellent Science room, we have one of my colleagues who is giving you an introduction and telling you what you're doing here. And here you have different pilot actions you can explore. And let's take my favorite pilot action, the quadrologue, and then you click hopefully on the quadrologue. You can say, okay, it explains here and here and here. That's what it did. And you can have a YouTube video explaining a little bit more about the pilot action. So this is a way how we tried in an easy way to familiarize people with RRI, familiarize them with the pilot actions, and you can move around. And if it works, I don't know, you can even listen to music, but I think this doesn't work now on the. So this is where you can find, if you want to know more about this, about the pilot activities I will tell you about now. If you want to know more, you can find it here. And I have to find my way now back to the presentation. Screen. So if you think about can you see now the full screen again of the presentation? So I think if you look at the public engagement activities, they were in quite different areas of research and research institutions. On the one hand, they were in research. On the other hand, there were only dissemination, promotion, and education activities. Some of them were mainly directed at researchers, so it was not a public, it was kind of interdisciplinarity. Some of them were for capacity building, and some of them were about political lobbying. So because Graham asked about the pathway declaration, I think the pathway declaration in a certain way was a public engagement activities, but a very different from how you want to, when you want to involve the public in your research activities. But what we tried to do here was motivate stakeholders in the public, and so that they put pressure on the European Commission so that RRI does not disappear from Horizon Europe. So what we did was that together with other projects who were funded within the SWAFT program, we created this kind of declaration, and we also tried to motivate people to respond to during the period where you can give responses to the European Commission about the proposal of Horizon Europe, to state that responsible research and innovation should stay there. And I think it had the impact that it was in the final report that there was mentioning that RI should be there, but how strong the pressure actually was in order to have, I think Horizon Europe could include more of RI aspects. The pathway declaration did what it could, but how successful it was, I don't know. So, but that was one way of public engagement which we try to engender in the project, was doing this kind of lobbying. And there was another lobbying activity as one of the pilot actions, which was in environment, to put together arguments why public engagement is good, and to send it to policymakers within the European Commission. And this was the pilot activity, public engagement from nice to have to need to have. So putting together arguments for why it is good and important to have public engagement in research. But we had a lot of pilot activities, and you can explore them on the RIX, where we tried to have people involved in research at different stages of research and with different instruments. For instance, there is the quadrilogue, which is basically trying to bring together people around the coffee table, 4 people representing cutting-edge research, representing students, representing a citizen, and representing somebody from university administration to talk about the societal implications of cutting-edge research. That's something which came up in the ERC social lab and was implemented in Ben Gurion University in Israel, and I think it was a great success there. And it was also included there in their everyday work. So they have this on a regular basis to bring together these different actors which normally don't meet and normally don't interact, and so they, I think, come into a kind of fruitful discussion. In another in the Marie Curie action, there was a different take on how to involve the public. There very often people don't know, or researchers don't know how to do that. And in a co-creative activity, researchers developed a kind of a handbook or a leaflet how you can involve the public and what would be good instruments. A different social lab pilot activity was, for instance, the museum lab in Austria at the Vienna Natural History Museum, where the pilot action was to create actually a physical space within the museum where people can meet, researchers and the public can meet and talk about research and talk about public involvement. So you can see very different pilot activities which either create spaces, create material how to do it, or are activities in themselves how you involve the public. For instance, we have one of them was good practices of co-creation, where also different lessons and good practices were collected how you can have co-creation activities in health research. Or another activity was in transport, the Gene Voice activity, where students were brought together from a city in eastern Slovakia, and they discussed together the future of the transport system in their city. So you can see at very different stages of research, very different activities. Or if I take this here, Pintelligent, I think now you can, yeah, Pintelligence down here. This was actually a physical research project where the researchers developed a recycling bin, which tells people by using sensors what kind of material is it, how it should be recycled, and so on. And this was tried out at a festival, and there were surveys at this festival, what people liked, what people would need, and so on. So try to involve people in different ways in research. But there was also dissemination, promotion, and education. For instance, we had also in the ERC, there is a research project, and they don't know how can they make their findings, which they consider as very important for the public, how can they communicate them to the public in a different way? Or there was in the energy social lab a pilot action where there was they created a website where people can see where how renewable energy is in their country. Or there were there were 2 pilot actions which actually tried to open up by public engagement activities universities in Cluj and in another Romanian research facility. There was also, we had one activity which was basically education, how you get research into kindergarten activities. There were also for organizations, how can organizations show what they are already doing in terms of and develop stories from that and show it to the public. I think an interesting, although it's not public engagement, but it's, I think, still engagement, but engagement which is happening not very often and should be done more often, bringing together natural sciences and bringing together social sciences. Here we had something which we called nuclear dating, where we brought together a researcher who is in nuclear research with the social scientists to exchange and to develop together research ideas, which actually worked quite well. There are things like capacity building, like, for instance, there are ideas out there, public engagement, living labs, social labs. How can you bring these ideas together? How can you, so this is again something like providing something like good practices or providing something like guidelines, how to do it. This is also training on stakeholder engagement, training people on what they can expect when they want to engage with the public or with stakeholders. Capacity building in RI, for instance, going into, this was a social lab in security in Finland, going at a higher security education facility and bringing in the ideas of RI into them, into their activities, into the training of young police officers. So you can see, and this is something, and we only have 14 minutes now, and I think I should stop now. You can see that there are many different possibilities for engaging stakeholders and the public at very different stages with very different instruments. There is a lot of knowledge out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And I think this is something which might be interesting for the GRRIP project, because listening to you at the last consortium meeting and listening also to the discussions in the advisory board, I'm deeply impressed by the work you're doing, the really difficult work of bringing it in institutions and creating processes within the institutions. But this was something the NewHoRRIzon project was little involved in. We were basically interested in what kind of ideas do people have, what kind of pilot actions would they need. And the next step is actually, it would be great if there are some interesting things for you, for the GRRIP project and for other projects, which you can take up and further develop further. Which brings me to the very beginning of this presentation. It was a pleasure for me to be able to present this to you. And I hope it is useful for you. Thank you very much.